Recency bias runs rampant in fantasy football. It does every single year. We got dudes out there getting rejected in their day-to-day life over and over and over, yet they keep going back for more. But heaven forbid in fantasy football, they have a player that does them dirty the year prior because they will write them off forever. Well, let me give you a little bit of a trade secret. Do not ever write off a player completely based off of only their previous year's production. Sometimes you just need to take the discount on draft day, say thank you, and hope that that high production returns. Remember, we're looking for those guys that are going to bounce back to that high production, and you can't bounce back if you've never bounced to begin with. Now, if this is the type of content you like, if this is what really gets the juices flowing, do me a favor and hit that like button. If this video can get over 500 likes, I'm going to pick a random commenter from down below in the comment section and give them a free 2024 fantasy football draft guide. Now, if you're like, listen, I don't want to wait for the likes to happen, I just want my draft guide pre-ordered now, head over to thefantasyheadliners.com and get yours right now. It's available for order on our website. But now, let's go ahead and dive into a few of these potential bounce back players in 2024. And the first guy we're talking about today is Kyler Murray, quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals. And the public perception of Kyler Murray in fantasy football is really weird to me. I really don't understand the dislike for him. Too many people get caught up in all the nonsense. Oh, the dude doesn't perform when COD comes out. All he's doing is playing Call of Duty. I don't care. I care about fantasy points, and that's just about it. And if you've actually looked at Kyler Murray throughout his career, he actually scores fantasy points. In 2019, he finished as the overall quarterback 7 in fantasy football. That was his rookie year. He averaged 18.6 fantasy points per game that season. In 2020, he finished as the overall quarterback 2 in fantasy football, averaging 24.4 fantasy points per game. How about in 2021? He was the quarterback 10 overall and averaged 22.2 fantasy points per contest. Now in 2022, he missed 6 games. But in the 11 games that he did play, he averaged, once again, 18.9 fantasy points per game. In 2023, we know he missed 9 games of that season, but he played in 8 games. In those 8 games, what did he average? Yes, 18.9 fantasy points per contest. Now, I can hear you out there speaking through the screen. Trust me, my ears are a little bit better than you may think, even though I'm basically old as dirt. It's obviously not ideal that he's missed some time the bulk of the last 2 seasons. But really, the majority of his time missed throughout his career has been from a non-contact torn ACL. That injury alone has accounted for 14 of the 19 missed games in his career. This isn't some case of Kyler Murray is just taking too many hits. He's not big enough. He doesn't know how to protect his body. He's not physically strong enough. No, that is not the problem. Now, is he some franchise quarterback that's going to take the Cardinals to the Super Bowl? No, he's probably not. But remember, all we care about is fantasy football production. I really don't care how many games per season the Cardinals win with Kyler Murray as their quarterback. I care how many points he scores per game in my fantasy football team. Now, for his career, he's averaging just under 500 yards rushing and 5 rushing touchdowns per year. That's like the cherry on top. We love that rushing upside. And Arizona, we already know they have a below average defense in a division with 3 other teams that can score big time points. That right there is 6 games every single season that we can kind of chalk up to the Arizona Cardinals playing from behind and Kyler Murray having to throw the ball more all 4 quarters. Now, the offensive line hasn't been great in years in Arizona. I think everyone knows that, but this offseason, they've added Jonah Williams and Evan Brown. They're trying to make an improvement there on the offensive line. James Conner, he is more than capable of taking some of that pressure in this overall offense off the shoulders of Kyler Murray. James Conner is another one of those guys that doesn't get enough credit for what he's doing on the football field. Now, when it comes to this passing game, I do love the talent of second-year wide receiver Michael Wilson. We've already talked about him here in this offseason. How about young tight end Trey McBride? This kid right now is one of, if not the best young tight end in football. I know that's somewhat spicy with the likes of Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid. I'm not taking anything away from any of those guys, but Trey McBride needs some recognition as well. Now, obviously, that's not enough on offense to give Kyler Murray that super high ceiling, but we also know that Arizona is expected to add an alpha wide receiver in the NFL draft. Whether that's Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors, there's some wide receiver talent in the draft this year. I will not be surprised if we see Arizona move back a few spots. If they can gain some more draft picks, have a team that moves up that wants a quarterback, they can still find themselves with an alpha wide receiver a few picks later. But has this offense really had a ton of weapons that it's utilized for years? Sure, DeAndre Hopkins has been there, but he's missed a lot of time as well. And yet, game in and game out, Kyler Murray comes out and puts up fantasy points. As of right now, he's barely being drafted within the top 12 quarterbacks in fantasy football. If this kid plays 14 plus games this season, he is going to be a huge draft day steal and definitely in line for a bounce back. Which then brings me to Christian Kirk, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and let's make one thing super simple here. Christian Kirk in 2022 was the wide receiver 11 overall to finish the season in fantasy football. He finished that year with 133 targets, 84 receptions, 1,108 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Then 2023 happened. Calvin Ridley, he was added into the mix. However, Christian Kirk still dominated early season targets. Actually, if you look at his numbers from 2022 and 2023 on a per game basis, they're almost identical. But then to end the season, he dealt with multiple injuries, and by the end of the season, a lot of people had just forgotten about Christian Kirk altogether. Well, now we fast forward to the 2024 offseason. Calvin Ridley is gone. A lot of people thought that he would re-sign in Jacksonville. He did not. He's now in Tennessee. And then we pair that with the fact that Jacksonville didn't bring in any other high-profile wide receiver. There was some initial thoughts about T. Higgins and some of his ties to Jacksonville joining them in the offseason, but obviously that did not happen. Now, yes, they brought in Gabe Davis, and while I think Gabe sees more consistent volume here in Jacksonville than he did in Buffalo, he's never going to be one of those huge volume type of guys. In my opinion, the addition of Gabe Davis probably hurts the production of Zay Jones a little bit more than it does that of Christian Kirk. Kirk is one of the best slot wide receivers in the NFL. He has 28 red zone targets over his last 29 games. He's averaging over 13 yards per reception with Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback, and as of right now, he is the clear favorite target of Trevor Lawrence in this offense heading into 2024. He's a proven wide receiver that has top 12 potential and is projected to be drafted as the wide receiver 36 in 2024. That is absolutely crazy. People are falling in love with all these new shiny toys, all these new young wide receivers, and I get that. But don't just totally forget about some of the proven vets. There is a very strong chance that we see Christian Kirk bounce back to another ceiling year this year in Jacksonville. Which then takes us to Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins, and there are a ton of fantasy football players out there that are just fed up with Jaylen Waddle after his performance in 2023, but was it really as bad as it seems? He averaged 11.6 fantasy points per game in 2023. In 2022, it was 13 fantasy points per game. In 2021, it was 12.1 fantasy points per game. We're not talking about some massive difference in scoring here. He's still in the neighborhood of his average career production, and he's still a top 20 wide receiver in the NFL among all NFL wide receivers in yards after the catch, yards per target, contested catch rate, target separation, fantasy points per target, and route win rate. He plays in one of the best overall offenses in the NFL. They are one of the highest scoring teams in the NFL. Now, sure, this offense just added Jonnu Smith at the tight end position, but that's not going to kill Jaylen Waddle. He had a down year last year. It happens. Now we get to draft him at a cheaper price in 2024. Last season, the guy was going as high as the second round. Now, this year, he could fall to the fourth round in some drafts as a wide receiver too, with huge upside. In the fourth round, the chance for the bounce back is definitely there. Which leaves us a tight end, the football kind. It's Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this one right here, kind of a sneaky bounce back in my opinion. He was the overall tight end 8 in 2022, but he missed some time in 2023, and when he did play, he had some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL. But all that is set to change right now. I don't care if it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, either one of them are going to be a huge upgrade for this entire passing offense in Pittsburgh. And I say that because we've seen both of these quarterbacks utilize the tight end position before in the past. We've seen Justin Fields feed Cole Kmet. What about Russell Wilson? He fed Jimmy Graham for years in Seattle, and he's also turned guys like Jacob Hollister, Will Dissly, even Nick Van Ette into some streamable options in the past. Then we add in the fact, on top of all of that, Pittsburgh let go of their number one big volume wide receiver in this offense, Deontay Johnson. So there are definitely targets available. If you look at the depth chart right now in Pittsburgh, outside of George Pickens, they're starting the likes of Van Jefferson and Quez Watkins right now. I definitely expect Pat Freiermuth to be utilized more across the middle of the field to really keep the chains moving. The yardage total may not be huge, but he could definitely rack up some receptions and some touchdowns in 2024. But just like the other guys in this video as well, people are kind of forgetting about him. As of right now, the consensus has him projected as barely a top 15 overall tight end, so you know he's going to be cheap on draft day. 2024 is definitely shaping up for a big-time bounce-back possibility for Pat Freiermuth. But who are a few of the players that you expect to bounce back in 2024? Remember, we like to keep this interactive. Myself and Kyle, we're both trying to get to almost every comment on every video that we possibly can. But remember, you have a like goal to hit out there. If this video once again gets over 500 likes, I'm going to give a random commenter down below a free 2024 fantasy football draft guide to help you absolutely dominate this year in fantasy football. Now I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.